10 years of silence, regret, and addiction. But today, David stands at the hospital door, ready to face the woman he abandoned, the mother he may have lost forever. Hi everyone, welcome to Life Flow, where every story brings a new perspective. Let's get started. The room was silent, but the tension in the air was suffocating. David stared at the door he had slammed shut just minutes earlier, his chest heaving with anger. He had never meant to push her. Never. But the guilt was already creeping up on him like a shadow, whispering in his ear, making him feel smaller than he already was. His mother had always been a gentle soul, her kindness a constant, like the warmth of the sun. And yet, he had betrayed that kindness. It had all started when he was 18, after his father's death. Losing his father was like having the ground ripped out from under him. His father had been the rock in his life, and without him, David felt completely lost. At first, it was alcohol, just to numb the pain. Then it became drugs, and the more he used, the further he distanced himself from everything that had once given him purpose. His mother, Mary, had done everything she could to help him. She had offered her love, her patience, even tried to get him into rehab. But to David, every offer of help felt like an attack, like she was trying to control him, to take away the only thing that dulled his pain. The night he pushed her had been the final straw. They had been arguing, again, about his addiction. Mary, in her soft but firm way, had begged him to stop, to accept her help. But David's anger had flared uncontrollably. In a moment of rage, he had shoved her. The look of shock and hurt in her eyes had cut him deeper than he expected. Her voice, trembling with emotion, had said, "David, I love you, but I can't do this anymore. You need to leave." And so, he left. He grabbed a few belongings, storming out of the house that had been his home, and disappeared into the night. He had felt her sadness like a weight on his chest as he walked away, but he couldn't stop. His shame was too great. David drifted through city after city, his life consumed by drugs and darkness. He slept on park benches, begged for change, and did whatever it took to feed his addiction. But no matter how far he went, the memory of his mother's face, her broken heart, haunted him. He knew she had searched for him. There had been times, months after he had left, when friends of the family mentioned how she had asked about him, called people they both knew, desperate for news. But he had stayed away, ashamed and angry. For months, David lived on the streets. It was during that time that he met Maria. She was the same age as him, and like him, she had once been lost in her own battle with addiction. They met by chance, late one night as David sat huddled in an alleyway, trying to escape the cold. Maria had walked by and noticed him, shivering and sick from withdrawal. Most people would have kept walking, but not Maria. She had been where he was, and she couldn't turn her back on him. She knelt beside him, wrapped a blanket around his shoulders, and offered him a cup of hot coffee. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone showed David kindness without expecting anything in return. Maria didn't judge him, didn't ask questions. She simply sat with him, talking to him like he was human, like he was worth saving. Over time, Maria helped David take small steps towards sobriety. She had been clean for a couple of years, and she knew the struggle he was facing better than anyone. They spent hours together, sharing their stories, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. Slowly, David began to find the strength to fight his addiction. Maria's belief in him gave him the will to keep trying. As their friendship grew, so did their connection. They both understood what it was like to feel broken, to have hurt people they loved. They found comfort in each other, and soon, their relationship turned into something deeper. Together, they built a life. Maria became his anchor, and with her support, David found the strength to stay clean. Eventually, they got married and had 2 children. David worked hard, determined to be a good father, a good husband, and to leave behind the man he had once been. But no matter how much time passed, the guilt over how he had treated his mother lingered. He thought about calling her many times, but the shame always held him back. He imagined her living in the same small house, wondering if she hated him or if she had moved on with her life. He wondered if she had given up on him after all those years of searching. The thought of facing her after everything he had done terrified him. For 10 long years, David stayed away. He built a life far from his old one, always avoiding thoughts of returning. Then, one day, everything changed. David was at work, laying bricks for a new house when his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but something told him to answer it. The voice on the other end belonged to a woman, a family friend he hadn't spoken to in years. "David," she said, her tone serious. "It's about your mom. She's had a terrible accident. It's bad." David's mind went blank. His mom? An accident? His heart raced as the words sunk in. She had been hit by a car crossing the street near her home. The woman explained that Mary was in the hospital, and things didn't look good. In that moment, David felt the weight of his past crashing down on him. He hadn't spoken to her in 10 years. He had abandoned her, left her to wonder where he was, if he was even alive. Shame filled him, but so did something else, fear. Fear that he would never get the chance to make things right. Fear that his mother might leave this world without knowing how much he regretted everything, without knowing that he had changed. For a moment, he hesitated. He wasn't sure if he could face her, if she would even want to see him after all this time. But then, the thought of losing her forever pushed him to act. He had to go back. He had to try, even if it was too late for forgiveness. Without another thought, David rushed home. He explained to Maria what had happened, his voice shaking with emotion. Maria, ever the understanding partner, told him to go, to do what he had to do. She knew this day had been coming for a long time, and she supported him without hesitation. David packed a small bag and headed for the bus station. As the city lights blurred past the window, memories of his mother flooded his mind. He had no idea what he would say to her when he saw her again. Would she even want to hear from him after all these years? Or would she still be hurt by the way he had left? He didn't have the answers, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let her go without telling her that he had changed, that he had fought his demons and built a life she could be proud of. As the bus neared the city where he had grown up, David felt his heart pounding in his chest. The streets looked the same, but everything felt different. It had been 10 years since he had set foot here, and now he was coming back, a different man. But would his mother see that? David stepped off the bus, his stomach in knots, and walked toward the hospital. He wasn't sure if he had the courage to face her, but he knew he had to try. David stood at the entrance of the hospital, his legs feeling like lead. The same streets he had once stormed down in a haze of anger and addiction now seemed foreign, as if he were a stranger in his own past. The hospital loomed large in front of him, sterile and unwelcoming. Every step he took inside felt like walking into the unknown, where guilt, fear, and hope mixed in equal measure. He had no idea how his mother would react. Would she forgive him? Would she still even want to see him? The thoughts circled endlessly in his mind as he approached the nurse's station. "I'm here for Mary Ortega," David said, his voice barely a whisper. The nurse looked at her clipboard, then back at him. "Are you family?" David hesitated. The word family felt heavy. Was he still family after all he had done? After all the years of silence? He nodded slowly. "I'm her son." The nurse's expression softened, and she pointed down the hall. "She's in room 312. You can go in, but please know she's still recovering. She's awake but weak." David nodded, muttering a quiet "thank you" before walking toward the room. Every step felt like a battle between the man he had become and the man he used to be. His breath quickened as he stood outside the door, his hand hovering over the handle. What would he say? Would she even recognize him? His heart pounded in his chest, his nerves twisting tighter with each passing second. Finally, he took a deep breath and pushed open the door. His mother was lying in the hospital bed, her frail form barely visible under the thin blanket. Her once vibrant face was pale, marked by age and the toll of the accident. Her eyes were closed, the steady beeping of the heart monitor the only sound in the room. David's heart ached seeing her like this, so fragile, so different from the strong woman he remembered. He approached her bed slowly, unsure of how to begin. He hadn't seen her in 10 years. Could he just walk back into her life after all this time? What if she was still angry? What if she blamed him? Before he could speak, her eyelids fluttered open. She blinked, disoriented for a moment, and then her eyes settled on him. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Her eyes widened in recognition, and tears welled up instantly, spilling down her cheeks. "David." Her voice was weak, barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a decade of longing. David sank into the chair beside her bed, his hands trembling as he took hers gently in his. His own tears fell freely now, as if the dam he had built around his emotions had finally broken. "Mom," he choked out, his voice breaking with guilt and sorrow. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Mary's hand, though weak, squeezed as softly. She looked at him with the same love she had always shown him, even when he had been at his worst. "I've missed you so much," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. David's heart ached at her words. He had spent so many years believing that he didn't deserve her love, that he could never come back after what he had done. But here she was, looking at him with the same compassion and warmth that had always been there. He had feared she would hate him, or worse, that she had forgotten him. But her tears told a different story. She had never stopped loving him, never stopped hoping he would return. "I didn't know how to come back," David said, his voice shaking. "I was ashamed. I was scared. I thought you would hate me." Mary shook her head, more tears spilling from her eyes. "David, I've never hated you. I've prayed for you every day. I've wanted nothing more than for you to be okay." David felt a sob rise in his throat, the weight of her forgiveness almost too much to bear. He had spent so long running from this moment, so long convinced that he had ruined everything beyond repair. But now, sitting here, holding her hand, he realized that love, the kind of love his mother had for him, never truly faded. "I've changed, Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not the same person I was. I've been clean for years. I've got a family now, a wife, kids. I've tried to be someone you could be proud of." His mother smiled softly through her tears. "I've always been proud of you, David. Even when you were lost, I never stopped believing in you." Those words hit David harder than anything else. After everything he had put her through, the lies, the violence, the abandonment, she had never stopped believing in him. His mother had always held on to the hope that he would come back, that he would find his way out of the darkness. And now, after all these years, here he was, sitting beside her, finally ready to make things right. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," David whispered, his head hanging low. Mary squeezed his hand again, her grip weak, but full of love. "Forgiveness isn't about deserving, David. It's about love, and I love you no matter what." David couldn't stop the sob that broke from his chest. He had carried the burden of guilt and shame for so long, convinced that he would never be able to fix the damage he had caused. But in this moment, with his mother's words washing over him, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. She forgave him. She still loved him. For a while, they sat in silence, their hands intertwined, letting the years of pain and separation melt away. David told her about Maria, about how they had met when he was at his lowest, and how she had helped him climb out of the pit of addiction. He spoke of his children, the life he had built, and how every day he fought to be a better man. His mother listened, her eyes filled with pride and love. "I'd love to meet them," she said, her voice soft but full of hope. David smiled through his tears. "You will, Mom. I promise." In the weeks that followed, David and Maria took time off from work, using their vacation days to stay near his mother and support her recovery. They rented a small apartment close to the hospital so they could visit daily and be with her as she healed. The time they spent together brought them closer than they had been in years, and with every conversation, the bond between mother and son grew stronger. The experience made David and Maria think seriously about moving back to the city permanently, to be near his mother and rebuild the family ties they had lost. They discussed it late into the nights, the idea of starting fresh in a place that once held so much pain now feeling like the right step forward. David brought Maria and the kids to meet his mother, and the moment she held her grandchildren for the first time was one of the most beautiful moments of his life. Her eyes lit up with joy, her heart full of love for the family she had thought she would never see. The years of separation, the pain, the guilt, they no longer mattered. What mattered was that he had found his way back to the person who had always loved him, even when he couldn't love himself. His mother's forgiveness had given him the chance to start over, to be the son she had always believed he could be. And for David, that was more than he could have ever hoped for. Can love and forgiveness truly heal the deepest wounds? If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.